Okay, so the last part that I wanted to talk to you about is in the intro. I talked about you were an organizer with the Green Party and worked with a number of green initiatives throughout your days. And I wanted to discuss something you mentioned in the introduction of your book, green capitalism, as this kind of
Era.
yeah, chimera. And you have this nice quote. Can I read, or do you want to read it?
Oh, hey.
Reducing consumption, which unavoidably means shrinking the economy, is necessary to bring a halt to rising amounts of greenhouse gases thrown into the atmosphere. Neither denying that global warming exists nor promoting so called green capitalism, the belief that there are magic techno fixes out there are realistic. The capitalist system requires constant growth, which means limitless expansion of production. Its internal logic also means that its incentives are to use more energy and inputs when more efficiency is achieved. The paradox that more energy is consumed instead of less when the costs drop, because production is for private profit in a system of relentless competition. Growth is necessary to maintain profitability, and continually increasing profitability is the actual goal. If a corporation doesn't expand, its competitors will put it out of business. If a corporation with tradables shares on a stock market doesn't achieve consistently rising profits, its stock is punished until a new executive leadership is installed that does as financiers demands. And that is all to say that green capitalism is something that we discuss in our latest chapter in Capitalist Realism, in the context of environmental catastrophe being an example of how capitalist realism can be challenged.
The idea of, we can just change our ways and go to renewable energy and we don't have to do anything else and business can just roll along right as usual, it's just not realistic. Green capitalism is not going to save us. In their own way, liberals are just have much their head in the sand as the conservatives who deny the reality of global warming are. Now, no self respecting liberal would think of denying global warming. They have too much honesty for that, but they're not realistic in what to do about it. The Jevons paradox is kind of the name for that, where for when energy gets cheaper and you wind up using more of it instead of using less of it, as it gets more efficient, and that's been a pretty persistent thing. The problem is the world is finite. Even the solar system is finite. People have these grandiose ideas. We'll mine the moon. We'll strip mine the asteroid belt. Even if that were viable, and I have real doubts about that. Star Trek is not a documentary, and I'm a big Star Trek fan, but it's not a documentary. Even if that were possible, the solar system is finite too. Eventually you're just going to run out of stuff. You just can't. We're doing it something like 1.4 Earths, i.e., we're consuming the Earth's resources 40% faster than they can be replenished. Well, you can't do that forever. You're going to just run out of stuff, and we're going to run out of oil and gas pretty soon. Even if we were viable, even if we're okay to burn the stuff, which of course it's not. So there's just no solution around. We've got to do with less. We have to use less energy. We have to consume less. Now, if we just got rid of planned obsolescence, that would go a long way toward it there too. If we would just build things to last a lot longer instead of having everything fall apart in 2 years, so you have to go out and buy new stuff. If we would reuse things and not simply recycle, right? You've got your three R's: reduce, recycle, and the other one there,
Reuse.
right? And why do people like recycle? Because it's the easy one out of those three. Reduce and reuse; those ones are harder, especially reduce. So that's why the stress is always on recycle there. It's kind of, again, a kind of a liberal approach to things there. But we have to reuse and we have to especially reduce. There's just no way around that. Otherwise, everything is heading for a collapse. And
Mark Fisher has a really great quote here. The relationship between capitalism and eco disaster is neither coincidental nor accidental. Capital's need of a constantly expanding market, its growth fetish, means that capitalism is by its very nature opposed to any notion of sustainability.
Grow or die, and that's the secret of capitalism. That's what every capitalist actually understands, whether they would see it in that kind of stark a term, but in their bones, they know that it is. If they don't grow, somebody else's will and run them out of business. That's the reality of it. So it doesn't even matter. Sometimes people like to say, "Oh, well, the capitalists are so greedy," but it's kind of the other way around. It's just like whoever is in that position is good. It's the greedy people who are attracted to that. It's so if you had a system that rewarded cooperation, well, cooperation would be what would get rewarded, and we're in a system where greed is what gets rewarded, and that's who's going to get attracted. Who wants to be a financier? How many people out there really like, I want to be wealthy so badly, I'm willing to throw grandmothers out of their houses? Most people really don't want to do that. There's a small fraction of people who are willing to do that, and those are the ones who are attracted to finance and those sorts of things. Most people don't need to be a millionaire, don't think about a millionaire. They just want to be able to live comfortably and have a nice life, and go out on Saturday night with their friends and see the ball game or go to the theater or whatever it is they like to do. And if we distribute everything, we have more than enough for people to do that. We can shrink the economy, and there still will be more than enough for everybody to live comfortably and do okay. Live in mansions and like a millionaire? No, but does anybody really need to do that? I don't think so.
You happen to come across Kohei Sato, the author. He just read a book, Marxism in the Anthropocene. He's Japanese, Kohei
Keido
Sato.
Sato. Yes. Okay, thank you for jogging me there. I'm familiar with. I'm aware of the book, but I haven't actually had a chance to wear it. I'm not really. I'm certainly not conversant enough to.
Yeah, no, I read it once, and I wouldn't say I'm conversant enough to speak on it. But I was just wondering. I was just wondering because his thing is on degrowth Marxism, essentially.
Right. Yeah, there's a number of books out there. I recently read a book and actually reviewed it called Half Earth Socialism that Verso Books put out maybe about a year ago. It's kind of an interesting book. Interesting ideas. Unfortunately, they didn't have an explanation of how we might possibly get to such a book. They basically laid out their case, which, agree or disagree with the viability. They certainly made their case very well. And then they ended the book with a chapter on this is what it would be like to be living in this world. And I have to tell you, boy, sure, a hell of a lot better than this world. I'll tell you that. But the problem is, well, okay, how do we get there? And I'm not putting down the two authors of the book because, as I said earlier, I don't have the secret to how we get from here to a better world. And I would tell everybody if I did. So I cannot condemn somebody else for also not having the answer.
Yeah.
But their basic thesis was that because we've done so much environmental damage, we've spread ourselves so thickly over the earth that we have to rewild half of the earth.
Drew Pendergrass and Troy Vatisse?
Yes, those are the authors.
Yeah.
And their thesis is that we have to rewild half the earth, so we have to evacuate half the earth, pay people and give them subsidies, of course. Don't just say, hey, you're out of here. Do everything you can and move people to other places and then allow half the earth to, become a wild preserve there.
Yeah, Sato doesn't say that.
Yeah, and
I'll say that.
That's
I actually kind of like this. It is very much.
What does Sato say?
Well, Sato, because the thing with Sato is like the first half of the book is just laying this exhaustive grounding for what he's going to say in Marxist theory, and he deep dove into the German Mega, the Marx Engels.
Right.
Their
collected works. Yeah.
Yeah. He just deep dove into Mega to like every freaking thing Marx and Engels wrote about the environment. Has this whole theory about how Engels didn't care as much about the environment and is sort of the reason why socialism has this like productivist reputation, blah blah blah. And then he kind of gets into sort of how degrowth would look and how it would work, and he takes the time to define it in like Marxist terms of the metabolism of the earth, which comes from some essay that Marx wrote. It's interesting, but he more or less is saying, no, we just need to understand, like, produce for human needs, not for, production's sake and collecting value. And, so in interviews and stuff, even will lay out a little more like, yeah, no, I actually don't think that the third world needs to degrowth. I think that the first world needs to degrowth.
Right.
And has a sort of seemingly more pragmatic than what you described outlook to it. Things.
That sounds interesting. Yeah, he's part of a group of authors kind of around the monthly review who, are really trying to integrate environmentalism, deep and serious environmentalism with socialism. Ian Angus is another one. And of course, John Bellamy Foster, the editor of the monthly review, another author, is one or two others in there. And it's some very interesting work. What you just related to me sounds quite interesting, and that's the thing is it's not the third world that has to degrow, because if you go to somebody in the global south and says, we're just consuming too much, you really got to cut back. We all know what the answer to that is going to be,
Right,
and justifiably so.
Exactly.
Indeed, it's the first world that's got to cut, the global north that's got to cut back. And that's, of course, a message that not a whole lot of people yet want to hear, and certainly liberals don't want to hear that any more than conservatives do. That's the belief that, oh yeah, we'll just we'll build out renewable energy and business will be usual. And
China and India are cheating on their environmental targets.
Yeah. Now look, we certainly should convert to renewable energy. We certainly do everything we can to phase out fossil fuels as quickly as we can and go to renewable energy. I'm the last one who's going to deny that, but that's one part of a much bigger picture. That in itself is not going to get us there if we keep using as much. And remember, all those solar panels and the windmills and the electric cars, you have to manufacture that stuff, and in a lot of cases, you have to use very noxious minerals and chemicals and processes to build that stuff. It's not fossil fuel free.
Sometimes you have to kill a South American country to get those minerals.
Right. I mean, in windmills, to make them most effectively, you have to use some of the most noxious rare earth elements out there, and that not only are they really toxic, but you have to go through these incredibly toxic and polluting and heavily dangerous processes just to mine the stuff in the first place, and then to processes it, and then to put it into these things there. The standard batteries on electric cars, they have as what's happening with some of these electric bikes, they kind of go on fire all of a sudden. This is a problem. Now they're working on other types of batteries, so I imagine those sorts of things will get phased out there. But no matter what good solution, and I do believe renewable energy will become much more efficient, and the battery problem will be at least partially solved, maybe even largely solved. But it's still not going to get us there on itself. We're still going to have to use less energy. We're going to still have to produce less, consume less, and pollute less. And there's just no way around that. And that's what people still won't get their head wrapped around there. Other than socialists, they're the only people who are being realistic about this.
What do you think of the idea of, Mark Fisher comes out of a tradition of accelerationism, while he seems to also, kind of buck a lot of the consequences that they come to, or the conclusions that they come to.
At least broadly understood as to what acceleration.
What do you think of that kind of notion that it has to get worse in order to get better?
I think that's a very luxury kind of position. I think that's a very first world kind of global north kind of position to do. I don't think making it worse on people is really a very good idea. I mean more like consuming more will lead to an acceleration of capitalist economies to the point where it all eventually crashes or something like that. Is not?
Yeah, I mean,
well, that is making things worse. If you're trying to accelerate a crash that inevitably is going to happen if we stay on a present course, it's still a crash. I don't think, and you're just going to use up resources all the faster I can't see how that would be good in any way. I certainly would not endorse. I think we have to sound the alarms as loudly and as clearly as we can and tell people, like, look, we can't wait. It's all over if we wait for the crash. We have to, if we're going to have a better world and a viable world for future generations, we've got to turn the ship now. We can't wait till, we're backed into a corner there. It's going to be very, very difficult, nearly impossible to right the ship or turn the ship if we get into that kind of place. So I'm sure Mark was coming from a good place in that.
I don't think he endorses that.
Yeah.
That's just the school that he arrived out of, and there are a lot of like kind of speculative futures that come out of like Nick Land and the school of like techno-futurism of like basically that we need to accelerate the contradictions of capitalism in order to arrive at socialism.
I think we have plenty enough contradictions of capitalism already. We don't really need to accelerate it.
Yeah.
I look at it. All we have to do is open our eyes and be willing to observe what our eyes see. And if we can get enough people to do that, that's what's going to change it. Because that's where a movement is going to come from. It's not going to be like, okay, let's step on the gas pedal here and see how far we can push this before people are willing to change and open their eyes and do something different.